Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Asiatic Society's Literary Club. And shortly, the talk on At Night All Blood is Black by Dr. Vidya Vencatesan will begin. I request everyone to mute your audio and stop your video for better connectivity. And you all have to name yourself. If you have any name like Oppo or something like that, please rename yourself. If you cannot rename yourself, please write your name in the chat, then I will rename it. Thank you. Have an enjoyable evening.
Thank you.
So, good evening, all. I am Meenal Shirsagar, and on behalf of the Literary Club of the Asiatic Society of Mumbai, it is my pleasure to welcome you here this evening. We are indeed delighted to see so many of you with us on this occasion. Our speaker today, Professor Dr. Vidya Vencatesan, is well known to most of you. She's a former student of the University of Mumbai's French department and has now reached great heights, which you will hear about shortly. But in the meantime, for us, she's just Vidya. And she has readily consented to give us a talk on David Diop's At Night All Blood is Black, which won the International Booker Prize in 2001. Thank you, Vidya. The original book, Frère was published in August 2018 and won the Prix Goncourt de Lycéens the same year. It was later translated by Anna Moscovakhis, an American poet, writer, and translator, thus making Diop the first French author to win this award. David Diop is a West African writer who lives and teaches at university in France. Over a century after the First World War, he gives a merciless but poignant insight into the experience of West Africans who served, died, or had their lives changed forever in the brutal trenches of World War I, fighting for a country that was not theirs. It was the French government which had drafted around 200,000 soldiers from its colonies. The recruitments were not always voluntary. The short novel commemorates the contribution of these soldiers, stressing their vulnerability and their traumatic transformation on the front lines, capturing the violence and tragedy in a story that fills you with emotion. As a critic has stated, I quote, "It is incisive and scathing." Published in time for the Armistice Day centenary, it contributes to a reckoning with colonial history in French fiction, as we witness the ramifications of colonial history continuing into the present, the dehumanizing effect of war and colonization. And it is valid even today, whether colonial powers are involved or not. There's always the vilification of the other, the encouragement of humans turning into beasts so that they can fight and slaughter each other. One key significance of the novel, which appealed to me and to, I'm sure, most of us, is the anti-war stance. And this is timeless. We can all identify with this to the very utmost, to our very depths. Before I invite Vidya to speak, I must tell you very briefly about her academic accomplishments. There are far too many to enumerate here. I'll list only the most significant ones. So, Dr. Vidya Venkatesan is professor and head of the Department of French at the University of Mumbai. She's also the director of the Center for European Studies, University of Mumbai, editor-in-chief of Synergie and a high-level Francophone journal, local coordinator of the Erasmus Mundus program, and interestingly, she was honorary secretary of the Asiatic Society for 2 years from 2007 to 2009. To talk about her academic parkour, her record. Okay, not record, but you know what she did. Mainly, she has a PhD from the Université de la Sorbonne Nouvelle, Paris 3, on a comparative study of military companionship and male bonding in the cycle of Guillaume d'Orange and the Valmiki Ramayana. Guillaume d'Orange is the 12th, 13th century Chanson de Geste, part of the cycles of the Chanson de Geste. She has won many scholarships and fellowships. I will not talk about all of them, but I will tell you about the 3 international awards she has. The French government has conferred on her 2 awards, the Chevalier dans l'Ordre des Palmes Académiques in 2009, and also le Chevalier des Arts et des Lettres the same year. And also it's the Italian government that has conferred, sorry to mispronounce this, Vidya, in 2016, Cavaliere dell'Ordine della Stella d'Italia.
Bravissimo.
Yeah, was it good? Thank you. Of the many publications, the long list, I'll just name a few, if I may. The Companion in Warfare, a comparative study of the Valmiki Ramayana and the sequel of the Guillaume d'Orange, which is published in the Journal of the Asiatic Society in 1998. And then Representation of Women in Epics in the book Memories of the Second Sex, Gender and Sexuality in Women's Writing, edited by Dominique Varma in 2000. I'll now move on to something that will be of great interest to everybody, a translation of Javed Akhtar's poetry from Urdu into French, and she's titled it D'autres mondes, Other Worlds. The latest is a translation of La Panse du Chacal of Raphaël Confiant, who is from La Martinique, and translated as Cane Cutter's Song, and published in 2021 by The Speaking Tiger. So there you are. That was not too long a list, Vidya. I really cannot enter into more details on this. And she has, of course, given many public lectures, and she's a research guide. And interestingly, is reading Urdu French with Javed Akhtar in Paris and elsewhere of his work, Other Worlds. So there we have a very accomplished speaker. I now hand over the mic to you, Vidya. Do please start. Thank you. Thank you, Vidya. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here. Delighted to be amongst friends. Asiatic was home to me, is part of my family. If one learned to do research when it was not at the Bombay University and the Cercle Littéraire, it was at the Asiatic. One was surrounded by giants and one aspired to be a little better than where one was. And I think when you reach for the stars, at least you get to the treetop. So very, very happy to be at the Asiatic. I've served here in many capacities, but like I said, this is home and I'm in my family. And so thank you very much for having me. I must tell you that I'm no specialist of war literature. There are people who specialize in this. I don't. This is not my field of specialization. But thanks to a paper we offer at the University of Mumbai, which is called L'Extrême Contemporain, where we teach a paper on literature that is a book that's been published not more than 2 years ago. I mean, that's as far as we'd go, or at outer limit 3, but honestly, we stick to 2. And so students get a flavor of what is written today. And frankly, students are an excuse. We get to study in depth something which is very current, because when we are 8,000 kilometers from a country and a culture, it's very easy to sort of freeze in the past or, not quite keep abreast, not because of any other reason, except that, there is a comfort in older literature. You've taken your time to read it, and you've got a million other things to do. So this paper is the delight that one feels at being able to teach something very contemporary. And as it happens, it's easy enough as academics for us to get in touch with the writer, to invite him to our class, to request him to answer a few questions. And as an Indian reading a novel, a French novel, I feel there is a great deal that I personally, as a reader, bring to the reading of the text. And this has been my experience with writers who've always welcomed another point of view, because We speak French, but the prism of our sensibilities remains rooted in India, in my case. And so we have another take on the story. So today we're going to be discussing David Diop's Le Frère d'Âme in French. And in English, it has been entitled At Night, All Blood is Black. Um, I will begin with this little note where I will tell you that David Diop is a fellow academic, and that's how he likes to be known. He teaches at the Université de Pau, and he actually specializes in the 18th century. But the legend goes, I mean, legend or whatever, because he did say this himself, that he was going through the letters written by French soldiers back home. They were known as poilus. We'll come to that later. And these were French soldiers who'd gone to war and who wrote back home, and they were letters full of pathos. There was despair, there was absolute feeling of dejection that they didn't know what they were doing in this war, why they were being used as cannon fodder. And he thought to himself that after all, African soldiers also fought this war. What about them? What did they write? And so he started searching, and curiously, he found that there were hardly any letters. And if they were letters where they were very formal letters to the administrative officers saying they'd not received their pension or there was some problem with the accounting, but nothing that spoke of their feelings, of how they lived this war. And after all, this was not their war. They had been enlisted. They had gone to a foreign land. They were fighting against a people they didn't know. They were fighting for a country which was not theirs, a cause that didn't speak to them at all. They were merely enlisted, like you'd probably enlist an animal to draw a cart. When it gets too heavy, you attach another pair of bulls and you sort of push it along. They were simply taken on because the mother country, quote unquote, needed more cannon fodder. And this is what they provided. And so you have this novel which comes to his mind, and he starts off thinking he'll write an imaginary letter that an African soldier would have written back home when he described the war. So you have the same war, but as perceived, as experienced, as understood by the Black African soldier. And he himself being part Senegalese, he chose to tell the story of a Senegalese rifleman. Now, the term Senegalese rifleman is actually tirailleur sénégalais, which is a special force that was created. But the word Senegalais doesn't really mean anything because they didn't only come from Senegal. We'll come to that later. On the first slide, I put the International Booker Prize because it's something that he won with his translator, Anna Moscovakhis. This, I'm pronouncing her name all wrong. She likes to be called as Anna, and I take the liberty. And this is a prize which is shared between the writer and the translator. As a translator, obviously, I was deeply moved by this because a writer, after all, creates and a translator transcreates. So she has put her own, she's enriched it with her own translation. And so today I choose to begin my presentation with both these people in the slide, because I think but for him, we won't have the novel, and but for the translator, we won't have this beautiful, immensely beautiful translation called All Night is Black. We'll come back to the discussion on the title later on. Maybe have the second slide, please. So one of the reasons this book appealed to me at the very beginning was because it won the Prix Goncourt des Lycéens in 2018. France has a wonderful system. The Goncourt Prize, which is a very prestigious literary prize, has a part of it which is dedicated to young high schoolers, and they get to vote. They get to choose between 4 shortlisted books, and they get to choose the best books. They obviously to read the book, they have to defend the book in front of a jury and amongst themselves. And the lycéens, the high schoolers of France, who had participated in this selection process, unanimously selected this book. So I thought if it appealed to students in France, it would certainly appeal to mine, and I can promise you it did. The next slide, please. So this is the story called At Night All Blood is Black. You have the First World War, and you have two characters, Alpha Nindiai and Mademba Diop. I've put these names on the slide simply because, you know, they're not familiar to us. It's not a French name. It's not an Indian name. So these are traditional African names. So I thought it would be nice to see what it looks like. So you have Alpha Nindiai and Mademba Diop. They are very good friends and they both enlist for the war. They're different as chalk and cheese. And they decide that since they have spent their childhood together, they would now like to spend their adulthood and old age together. And so if they enlist in the army, they will get to go to fight the war and come back as rich men. I mentioned Faripiam because she's a common love interest and she chooses Alpha. Alpha and Mademba both grew up in a little place called Gandiol. It's a little village. Alpha's father is Yoruba. His mother is Pendoba. And there is Yoruba is also formally known as two people in the waiting room. I don't know what to do. Somebody is waiting. Can somebody please let them? Okay, I can do that. All right, done. So, like I said, Basiru Kumba Nindiai is the formal name of Yoruba. And you have Aminata Sar, who's Mademba's mother. The story goes like this. I'm not telling it to you as the novel tells it. I'm going to tell it to you as a simple, straight story so that we get into the action soon enough. So you have Alpha Nindiai, who's born of Yoruba or Basiru Kumba Nindiai, and his Fula wife. Fula is one of the tribes, Pendoba. And when he grows up, his mother, who belongs to a nomadic tribe, is not able to live this sedentary life anymore. She wants to meet her family, who are all nomadic tribesmen, who take their cattle and go looking for pastures. And so she leaves home formally with her husband's permission. She leaves her child behind and she goes away. And Mademba Diop, who's his friend, sort of welcomes him into his own family. And Aminata Sar, who is Mademba's mother, accepts one more child into the fold, who is Alpha Nindiai. So Alpha Nindiai has a very loose and informal relationship with his own family, but now he's part of Mademba Diop's family or the Diop family. So this child who grows up in the Diop family and who really looks upon Mademba as his own brother, the two of them are circumcised together. That's why he will call them my more than brother. You know, in French, the expression is plus que frère. And you wonder whether it was just a feeling of overwhelming feeling of brotherly love. And my research into the Senegalese culture revealed that when you call somebody plus que frère, what it means is that you were circumcised together on the same day. So you now share an important bond, which means you're more than brothers. So these young people, they spent their childhood together. They want to enlist in the army. Alpha gets in, Mademba does not. And so you have, there is somebody in the waiting room again. I'm so sorry, I get distracted by this. Okay. He's admitted, sorry. So they decide to enlist in the army and Mademba is not accepted because they are the typical two friends who are very different from each other, like chalk and cheese. So Alpha is the strong, healthy one. He's tall, he's a wrestler. His body is a source of great admiration among women and men alike. And you have Mademba, who's a weakling, who's not very good looking, but who's very bright and who goes to the French school. So he knows French, whereas Alpha doesn't know French. And then both of them together say, okay, we'll enlist for the army. Mademba is first rejected. And then thanks to Alpha's efforts, who trains him, teaches him to build his body and his strength and look more army material. And they both go to the army. And what happens is that Mademba is killed. And that's where we really begin our story. So can we have the next slide, please? Uh, the story, this is how David Diop opens his novel. It's a little novella actually, and I find it very interesting that there should be three people who are quoted. There's Montaigne, there's Quignard, and there's Sheikh Amidou Khan. We embraced each other by our names. Now, this refers to the essay on friendship, but by Montaigne, where Montaigne describes his relationship. He's a 16th century French philosopher, and he describes his relationship to his best friend. Apparently, they were different as chalk and cheese. And when he was asked as to what did you find in the man? I mean, why are you guys such best friends? He said, parce que c'était lui, parce que c'était moi, because he was he and I was I. So at another moment, he says, we embrace each other by our names. So when we talk of the epitome of friendship in French literature, we always refer to Montaigne and La Boétie. So he quotes them. Then he speaks of Pascal Quignard, who says, who thinks betrays, because the character of Alpha um, in the story learns to think for himself. You see, this is the case of the post-colonial subject, who at one point stops just accepting whatever is fed to him by the colonizer and starts to think. And when he starts to think, the colonizer feels he betrays him, and his own people also feel so because he's a typical hybrid subject. Then we come to Sheikh Amidou Khan, whose Aventure Ambiguë is, or an ambiguous adventure, is one of the the classic of African literature in French. We don't call it Francophone literature because it's African literature written in French. Just like we have Indian literature in English, we won't call it Indian English literature. We call it, for political reasons, this is African literature written in English. It could be written in English, French, Portuguese, whatever you want, but it's basically African literature. It's not just Francophone literature, an extension of France. So, like I was saying, and this Aventure Ambiguë speaks about the journey of a colonized subject who goes into France and what happens when he comes back. So these are the three people he's going to use as his reference points, and I find that very interesting. We'll come back to it later. Next slide, please. Yeah, I wanted to, I've included a lot of extracts from the text, largely that, because I thought many of you would have probably not read the text, and hearing me speak with my whatever two penny analysis would not be as interesting, as flavorful as reading the writer himself. And I've also included a little clip of a video recording towards the end of of a famous American actor reciting the text. And Anna herself said that it was much better to do that than to read the text, because she said nobody could do it as well as he could. And she's probably right. But I kid not, since I did not get recordings of the whole text, I'm going to be reading bits for you and commenting as I go along. I also have a little section on history, but since many of you are historians, I want to tread very carefully. I don't want to bring coals to Newcastle, but some references might be interesting. So I begin with the incipit, which is the very beginning of the text. I know, I understand, I shouldn't have done it. And you will find that something very typical of this text is the very naive, candid style of writing. We must remember that Africa is an oral culture. So they have this, they write, he has chosen to give voice to Alpha Nindiai, who's no intellectual, who's no writer, who's no poet. He's a simple peasant who became a Senegalese rifleman who enlisted in the army. And so his language would come through in the same, with the same childlike candor and simplicity as if he was speaking. And a very important point that the writer makes is that he says, I've not written classical French. What I've written is Wolof uh, flavored French. Because when you read my French and now the English, I hope you will hear the undertones, the echoes, the resonances of Wolof, which is Alpha's language. Wolof is one of the languages spoken in Senegal. And so the character in the book actually speaks Wolof. But so that the French reader could understand him, he has translated that Wolof into French. So the French would have the same rhythm, similar images, and a different kind of music to it. Those of you who will be able to access the French text will find that it's different. The French is not the regular classical French that you find. It's not even a Sheikh Hamidou Khan style. And here, hats off to the translator. She has ensured that this is kept. You know, I read, I know, I understand, I shouldn't have. I, Alpha Nindiyai, son of the old man. I can't read my text clearly. Maybe I should reduce this. Yeah. I, Alpha Nindiyai, son of the old man. I understand. I shouldn't have. God's truth. Now I know. My thoughts belong to me alone. I can think what I want, but I won't tell. The ones might have told my secret thoughts to, my brothers in arms, who will be left so disfigured, maimed, and eviscerated that God will be ashamed to see them show up in paradise, and the devil will be happy to welcome them to hell, will never know who I really am. The survivors won't know a thing. My old father won't know, and my mother, if she's still of this world, will never find out. The weight of shame will not be added to the weight of my death. They won't imagine what I've thought, what I've done, the depths to which the war drove me. God's truth. The family honor will be spared, the honor of appearances. I know, I understand, I shouldn't have. So right at the beginning, we see how there is a certain oral quality, a certain sort of an incantatory tone that comes with repetitions, and there is almost that perfect rhythm. He begins with "I know, I understand, I shouldn't have done it," and it ends with "I know, I understand, I shouldn't have." And so I must tell you that this novel, as I read it, is at the crossroads of the epic and the fable. So any epic is a story of war, and this is the story of war. This is the story of the First World War. The First World War, as was lived by, as was experienced by the African soldier from Senegal, a simple peasant who went to become a Senegalese rifleman. So you will one of the few things that strikes us immediately is the incantatory tone, the repetitions, and a certain vision of the world, which is not that of the general commanding the army, but of the man actually caught in the trenches. And we will notice the important trope of family honor, of shame, and brothers in arms. So these would be the main tropes typically associated with the epic. And we also have this concept of paradise and God in paradise and the devil. We must remember we are in Senegal, where a large portion of the population belongs to the Islamic faith, and so there will be only one God. And so there's God's truth, which is nothing but one. There's no question of multiplicity. Can we have the next one, please? Then he talks about what he should have done or shouldn't have done. And we have an important theme here of inside out. Okay. And he's talking about what happened to Mademba. Ah, Mademba, my more than brother, took too long to die. It was very, very difficult. It wouldn't end from dawn into the evening, his guts in the air, his insides outside, like a sheep that had been ritually dismembered after the sacrifice. Except Mademba was not yet dead, and already the insides of his body were outside. While the others hid in the gaping wounds of the earth we called the trenches, I stayed close to Mademba. I lay pressed against him, my right hand in his left hand, staring at the cold blue sky, crisscrossed with metal. 3 times he asked me to finish him off. 3 times I refused. So here we have the image of the sacrifice, the sheep that is sacrificed. So who got sacrificed in the World War? Was it really the white man? It was his war. It was his sacrifice. But he sacrificed the colored people, the indigenous people. He sacrificed those who were expendable and then, of course, forgettable. Can we go to the next one, please? And there is this idea of inside out. We'll come back to it later. And you have Mademba begs his friend to kill him because he has been, the enemy has opened up his stomach up to the chest. So all his guts are spilling out and he wants to be killed. He's not yet dead. So this brings the descriptions. I've spared you some of the other descriptions. It is absolutely chilling, horrific. And Mademba is crying like a child. God's truth, I let Mademba cry like a small child. The third time he begged me to finish him off, kissing himself, his right hand groping at the ground to gather his scattered guts, slimy like freshwater snakes. He said to me, by the grace of God and that of our Marabu, if you are my brother Alpha, if you are really who I think you are, slit my throat like a sacrificial sheep. Don't let the scavengers of death devour my body. Don't abandon me to all that filth. Alpha Nindiyai, Alpha, I'm begging you, slit my throat. So we don't understand because it shouldn't be so difficult, right? So they're in an army situation. So if you can kill one guy, why not this man who's begging to die? And the situation gets more complicated. Next one, please. And although he doesn't slit his throat, Alpha goes into a deep guilt complex. He feels he let his brother down, his more than brother down. And we are in a war situation, as we will see in later passages. The epic hero is somebody who knows that in a war he cannot be alone. That's the worst thing that he can do for himself. If he has his companion, be it a military companion, so somebody who he would become friendly with, a military ally who would become friends with him and who, for a common cause, for equal benefit, they will be fighting together. So there's the ally, but there is the brother or the friend who's there for not for a cause, not for anything else, but for the hero, but to protect him, to be of emotional support. And somewhere we find that you have, this is common to all epics. You have it in the Rama and the Lakshmana, the Karna and Duryodhan, or you have Krishna and Arjun. You have it in every epic, Homer, whatever you want. Here, this is Africa too has a very rich tradition of epics, as we know. So here you have the hero and his friend, and this friend is going to die. The death of the companion is always a very, very painful moment for the hero, because as they say, part of him dies. And he is now alone, and solitude is what kills him, not death itself. So here he's feeling extremely guilty because his friend has died and he has not done what his friend asked him as his last favor to do. And he says, but instead of coming through for you, I let you die, condemning me, bawling, drooling, screaming, shitting yourself like a feral child. In the name of who knows what human laws, I abandoned you to your miserable lot. Maybe to save my own soul. Maybe to remain the person who raised me, hoped for me to be, before God and before man. But before you, Mademba, I was incapable of being a man. I let you curse me, my friend, you, my more than brother. I let you scream, blaspheme, because I did not yet know how to think for myself. To think for myself, to think is to betray. We remember Pascal Quignard, who this book mentions right at the beginning. We have the next one, please. And then he describes the scene when Mademba is dead. As soon as, and he dies of his own. So he dies bit by bit, and Alpha is unable to oblige and kill him, and Alpha is going to carry this guilt. As soon as silence fell on the blood-soaked battlefield, I began to think. You were no more than a heap of dead meat. I set about doing what you hadn't managed to do all day because your hand was too unsteady. I neatly gathered your still warm guts and deposited them into your belly, as if into a sacred vessel. In the twilight, I thought I saw you smile at me, and I decided to take you home. In the cold of the night, I took off my regulation trench coat and my shirt. I slid my shirt onto your body and tied the sleeves against your stomach, a very, very tight double knot that became stained with your black blood. I picked you up and brought you back to the trench. I held you in my arms like a child, my more than brother, my friend, and I walked in the mud, in the crevices carved out of mortar shells, filled with blood-stained water, dispersing the rats that had left their burrows to feed on human flesh. And as I carried you in my arms, I began to think, for what you asked me, eyes dry, the way one asks a favor of a childhood friend, like a debt owed, without ceremony, sweetly, forgive me. Yeah, so you have this uh, formal mea culpa that happens, and this is again typical of the epic, where if there is a death, then it has to be mourned. It has to be mourned ritually. The hero has to be cried for, and pardon has to be asked. Next slide, please. And this is where he starts commenting on the war. This is new to him. The colonial powers always justified their getting the colonized people to fight this war, saying, "Oh, Indians and Africans have this tradition. They are a martial race." Yeah, but if they're a martial race, why should they fight your war, right? You needed cannon fodder, and so you used them very happily, and you gave this supposedly cultural excuse. And here he observes soldiers, black and white, who always say yes. When commanded to leave the, I can't see this, when commanded to leave, one second. When commanded to leave the shelter of their trench to attack the enemy, defenseless, it's yes. When told to play the savage, to scare off the enemy, it is yes. The captain told them that the enemy was afraid of savage Negroes, cannibals, Zulus, and they laughed. They're content if the enemy on the other side is afraid of them. They're content to forget their own fear. So when they leap from the trench, their rifles in their left hands and their machetes in their right, hurling themselves out of the earth's belly, they do so with the eyes of madmen. The captain has told them they're great warriors, so they love to get themselves killed while singing, so their madness becomes a competition. I would like to take a moment here to draw your attention. I think somebody must mute themselves. It doesn't matter. So I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that um, historically it is proven that the Germans accused the French of introducing savagery into the war. What did they mean? The French were the first to include the colonized people from Black Africa, and then later the British involved Indians and others. And the Africa was, in the colonizers' view, a savage continent. Peoples were savage, and after all, let's not forget French colonization had the supreme mission of mission civilisatrice, the mission to civilize. So they were bringing civilization to the savages of Africa. And so by introducing these people to fight the war alongside the whites, Germany accused France of including savagery. And they were not wrong, because the French were not introducing them as equal fighters. They had been given something that the white soldier, the poilu, didn't have. They had a machete, okay, besides their rifles. So the idea was they would terrorize the enemy. The enemy would first die when he sees them, because he has the German soldier has been raised with all the right stereotypes. He's been told that, like they say here, they're cannibals, the African people, they're savage Negroes. Okay, so when he sees the Negro as one of the people attacking him, I use the term Negro because that's what the writer uses. If I said black, it would be quite out of place here. So please forgive this, the use of this denigratory term, which I do not share at all. I say this because that's what is appropriate for the moment. It is a term used by the writer. We're referring to the 20th century, early 20th century when this war is fought. So the idea of savage Negroes, cannibals. So when the white German soldier sees the black soldier attacking him, he actually doesn't think he's quite capable of using the rifle to shoot him or anything. He probably thinks that he's going to be eaten up alive as a cannibal. He's going to be raped. God knows what will be done to him because this man is a savage, right? And so the captain, the French captain, tells the African soldiers that you please play on this. You keep your machete with you, and you hurl yourself out, and you must show that madness in your eyes, right? So that madness, they will be terrorized to death, not necessarily killed by your rifle. Next one, please. Now we come to the point when these two are obviously in the same battalion, and he's going to wait. He's Mademba Diop obviously doesn't want to be outdone by the others. And remember, all Africans, we have a tendency, even though we are a post-colonial society, just like there's not one India and we're still one country, it's as if we even when somebody speaks to us about Indians, we take objection, right? We say, I'm sorry, every corner of India is different. There's no one India culturally. Maybe we are a political unit, but we're very different in customs and beliefs and traditions and so on. Similarly, Africa is a continent. So, we're just a subcontinent, that's a whole continent, and we tend to think of it as one block where everybody's black and probably everybody's a member of a tribe or, whatever. We have our own share of stereotypes. Indians are not to be left far behind on that one. Whereas here you get to see in this passage, for example, the number of divisions and subdivisions and very hierarchical, diverse society that they have. So a Diop would not want it said of him that he's less courageous than an Indian. And so the minute the sound of the Captain Armand's whistle commands him, he leaps from his hole and screams like a savage. Same rivalry between the Keitas and the Sumares. Same thing between the Dialos and the Fey, the Kanes and the Thunes, the Dianes and the Kurumas, the Beas and the Kapulis, the Sals, the Deng, the Sex, the Kas, the Sise, the Ndur, the Tures, the Kamaras, the Bas, the Pals, the Kulibalis, the Sonkos, the Sis, the Sisokos, the Dramis, and the Traores. They will all die without thinking because Captain Armand has said to them, you, chocolat of Black Africa, referring very tenderly to their dark complexions, they call chocolate. Chocolat of Black Africa are naturally the bravest of the brave. France admires you and is grateful. The papers only talk of your exploits. So they love to sprint into the battlefield to be beautifully massacred while screaming like madmen, regulation rifle in the left hand and savage musher in the right. Please remember, he's going to insist on madness. He's going to talk of beautiful massacres, okay, because it's almost choreographed. As he will tell you later on in another passage, he says that I don't understand. The captain whistles, and this whistle is not just heard by the French inside the trench. It is heard by the Germans on the other side. So when he blows the whistle and we all pop out of our trenches, we're actually ready victims. The Germans have already trained their rifles and they just shoot at us. Boom, boom, boom. How silly to blow a whistle, imagining that the Germans who are just across the no man's land won't even be able to hear us. So what happens is the first few who come out are the ones who are slaughtered. And while these friends from the trenches are falling, the others would come forward, walk on those dead bodies and go across the no man's land. Next page, next slide, please. And here he says, The captain's France needs our savagery. And because we are obedient, myself and the others, we play the savage. We slash the enemy's flesh. We maim, we decapitate, we disembowel. The captain's France needs for us to play the savage when it suits them. They need us to be savage because the enemy is afraid of our mashaka. So here you have a black African soldier who has understood that his value is in the fact that he's a savage. So this image of the savage, this stereotype that was carefully constructed by the colonial powers to justify the reason why they just walked into another country and started exploiting its natural resources and ill-treating its people. They said they were bringing civilization to a savage continent. So here you have India who has now started to think and who says, oh yes, our savagery is very important, but we must be obedient savages. And we need to maim, decapitate, and disembowel, because this is actually not allowed in war. But if we do it, they will say, oh, sorry, they were savages. They don't operate by our laws. And so the mashet becomes a very important symbol. I'll continue. The next slide, please. And now this is what Alpha Nimbi starts doing. Alpha Nimbi brings back foils. It's a savage war, he says for the first time. He is not savage. The war is a savage one. And what he does is he kills the enemy and he cuts off the right hand that had held the rifle. Okay. So he says, I brought back the spoils of a savage war. You never know at what point savage stops going with African and moves to war. It's a very subtle passage that we notice in Diop's writing. I brought back at the end of every battle, in the dark night or in the night bathed in moonlight and blood, an enemy rifle, along with the hand that went with it, the hand that had carried it, the hand that had gripped it, the hand that had cleaned it, discharged it, reloaded it. And I always came back to the earth's womb after the others, sometimes under enemy fire, whether it was windy or raining or snowing, as the captain said. And I always brought back an enemy rifle, and the hand that had carried it, gripped it, cleaned it, greased it, the hand that had loaded it, discharged it, and reloaded it. Once again, we're back into that incantatory rhythm of the novel, which is very close, which is the reason why I would call it an epic. There is this incantation, which is a very integral part of any epic, and you find it very much in this novel. So he's coming back with the hand, okay? And initially, when he comes back with the hand, he is welcomed. You know, he's the hero. Can we have the next slide, please? He's the hero. People are amazed that he can have this hand with him. And nobody had thought of it. But remember, he has a mashete, so he can slice that hand. And so he explains to you how it works. This is not for the tender-hearted. But what I want is to fight face to face. That's why I run, shoot, throw myself on my stomach, and crawl to arrive as close as possible to the enemy on the other side. In sight of their trench, I slow to a crawl. Then, little by little, I stop moving almost completely. I play dead. I wait calmly to capture one of them. I wait until one comes out of his hole. You see, suddenly the trench, it was the womb. So the soldier emerged from the trench, he emerged from the womb, he emerged as a madman, running, the savage who went to terrorize. And now it is a hunt. So he's lying in wait and he's waiting for the other to come out of the hole, like an animal would come out of its burrow. So the enemy would come out of his trench, but that one is called a hole. I wait for the evening ceasefire, the moment of relief, when shooting stops. One always comes out from a mortar shell hole where he's taken refuge until he can return to his trench close to dusk, when no one is shooting, right? Ceasefire, as the word says, no shooting is allowed. But obviously, Alpha is going to continue to kill. And what would be the justification of France? Oh, he's a savage. He didn't know our terms. So then, with my machete, I slash the back of his knees. It's easy. He thinks I'm dead. The enemy from the other side doesn't see me. A corpse among corpses. Now, in his mind, I've come back from the dead to kill him. The enemy from the other side is so scared. He doesn't make a sound while I slash the back of his knees. He just crumples. So I disarm him. Then I gag him. I tie his hands behind his back. Next one. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's more difficult. Some of them don't give in. Some don't want to believe they're going to die. Some resist. So I knock them out silently because I'm 20 years old. And as the captain says, a force of nature. Then I pick them up, either by the sleeve of their uniform or by a boot. I pull them very gently as I crawl into a terra persona, no man's land, as the captain says, between the two giant trenches, across the motor holes, across the pools of blood, whether it's wind, rain, sleet, or snow. As the captain says, I wait for him to wake up. I wait patiently for the enemy from the other side to wake up if I've knocked him out. So I don't have to knock him out if the one I dragged from his mortar shell hole has let me take him, believing he can outsmart me. I wait and catch my breath. I wait until we are both calm. While waiting, I smile at him in the light of the moon and the stars, so he doesn't become too agitated. But when I smile at him, I can sense him wondering, what does the savage want from me? Is he going to eat me? Is he going to rape me? I'm free to imagine what the enemy from the other side thinks, because I know, I understand. Looking at the enemy's blue eyes, I often see a panicked fear of death, of savagery, of rape, of cannibalism. Next page. I see in his eyes what he's been told about me and what he's believed without ever seeing me. You see, here is where the colonial stereotypes come into play. I think that in seeing me look at him, smiling, he's telling himself that they didn't lie to him, that with my teeth white at night, with or without a moon, I will devour him alive, or something even worse. The terrible thing is when, once I've caught my breath, I undress the enemy from the other side. When I unbutton the top of his uniform, that's when I see the enemy's blue eyes mist up. That's when I sense what he fears the worst, whether he's stoic or distraught, brave or cowardly. At the moment I unbutton the jacket of his uniform, then the shirt to expose his belly, bright white in the moonlight or in the rain or in the softly falling snow, that's when I catch the eyes of the enemy from the other side starting to dim. They're all the same. The tall ones, the short ones, the fat ones, the brave ones, the cowardly ones, the proud ones. When they see me looking at their trembling white bellies, their eyes go dim. All the same. You see, here is the stereotype. That is, when Mademba has been killed, he only tells him that it was a pair of blue eyes that he remembers. The German soldier with the blue eyes who had opened his insides out. And so he will refer to the German soldier, Alpha India, throughout as the pair of blue eyes. And just like Europe thought that all Africans were black, similarly, he says, all the same. Next slide, please. Then I pull back a little and think about Mademba Diop. And each time I hear him in my head begging me to slit his throat, and I think I was inhuman to let him beg me 3 times. What I didn't do for a friend, I do for my enemy, out of humanity. When they see me reach for my machete, the blue eyes of the enemy from the other side extinguish themselves for good. The first time, the enemy kicked me and tried to run away. Since then, I make sure to bind the ankles of the enemy from the other side. And that's why, as soon as I have my machete in my right hand, the enemy starts to squirm like a madman, as if he thinks he can escape. It's impossible. the enemy from the other side. I find this expression very interesting. So there is an enemy from this side also. Clearly, that's why he says the enemy from the other side. So for the black man, who is the enemy? The white man, right? Who came to colonize him. But the white man is now divided into the right side and the wrong side. The enemy from the other side must know that he can no longer escape, being so tightly bound, and still he hopes. I can read it in his blue eyes, the way I read it in Mademba Diop's black eyes, the hope that I might alleviate his suffering. His white belly is exposed. It rises and falls in jerks. The enemy from the other side gasps and screams, now in stark silence because of the gag. I've cinched around his mouth. He screams in stark silence when I take the insides of his belly and pull them outside in the rain, in the wind, in the snow, or in the bright moonlight. At this time, his blue eyes don't dim forever. Then I lie down next to him, turn his face towards mine. I watch him die a little, then I slit his throat, cleanly, humanely. At night, all blood is black. You see, I had chosen this rather long passage, and I hope you'll forgive me for taking so much of your time with reading, but I wanted to come to the title, At Night, All Blood is Black. Those of you who are familiar with French, and most of you are from what I can see, you will agree with me that it's not the exact translation of the title. The title says Frère d'âme. Now, Frère d'âme would be more or less what you would use for a sister soul or somebody who you're very close to. So a soul sister, a soul brother. So Frère d'âme. And in French, to the âme, you just add an R and it becomes Frère d'armes, which means comrade in arms. So he was playing on the word in the title, on a comrade in arms who's also a sister soul. But the translator, Anna, says that she knew she couldn't play with the equivalence and she couldn't work on that. And it would be too banal a title to say comrade in arms or sister soul or something like that. But she's struck by this expression in the text itself. At night, all blood is black, which brings us to the very center of our of the book. What I understand is the very heart of the book, which is its anti-war agenda. Because finally, who dies in the battlefield? Young people die, and with them die our future, our dreams, our promises that we made to life itself and to time. That's what dies on this battlefield. And finally, there's no difference whether they're a pair of black eyes or a pair of blue eyes, whatever be the ideology, however noble the cause. Finally, all at night, all blood is black, and that is it. So this is one of the most beautiful parts of the book, I find. We can have fancy literary analysis of it, but what this book really speaks about is the anti-war agenda. And it's an anti-war agenda without any elaborate pleading or putting forth of arguments. He presents the story as it is. He tells you what Alpha Nindiite saw and what Alpha Nindiite did because of what he saw. It is a savage war. It is not the people who are fighting it who are savage. The war, by definition, is savage. And when it involves people of different cultures, without any comprehension of either the cause, thrown into climates that they are not familiar with, into a terrain which is not theirs. As if you read the novel, you realize that at no point are you told where this battle is being fought. Think about when we study the First World War, the Second World War, these battles have names, almost humanizing the battle. Only if it has a name, la bataille de la Marne, la bataille de la Somme, and we somewhere puff up with pride, be it nationalistic or otherwise, and it becomes a cause to which we adhere to over the centuries or across the centuries. But here in the novel, this war is happening somewhere. Because it says Tirailleurs Sénégalais, we are able to understand that it is the First World War and that this is happening between 14 and 18. But otherwise, the battle doesn't have a name. All battles are the same. They are massacres, as he says, beautiful massacres. They are pools of blood. They are crevices made by mortars that are shelled. And it is young people who are simply mowed down, sometimes for an ideology, sometimes for a few feet of land, and sometimes for not even that. Next slide, please. So this is where she got her title. Here he speaks of the... how much time do I have, Mrs. K? Should I wind up?
Oh, no, Vidya, please continue.
I can take another 15 minutes.
Oh, yes, totally.
Okay, but
if
there's a problem, you just ping me, okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I don't think there'll be a problem.
Okay, so this is the part now. It's very interesting how the book is constructed. So you have three spaces. The first space we open, as we saw, with the war. We don't know where, but it's a war zone. So there are trenches, there's no man land, and there are trenches again. So there are blue eyes on the other side. He doesn't talk of the blue eyes here, but at one point he does refer to them because he's a little confused because these are whites against whites, right? It's supposed to be white against black, or that's what he understood when they came to his country. But now he finds that whites fight against whites also. So there are blue eyes on both sides, but this side, the blue eyes on this side of the no man's land, where in the trench in which he is, it's supposed to be okay, so you don't kill them. And you have the description here of the friendship that he feels for Mademba, who's a more than brother. We're the same age. We were circumcised on the same day. You lived at my house. I watched you grow up, and you watched me. Because of that, you can make fun of me. I can cry in front of you. I can ask you anything. We're more than brothers because we chose each other as brothers. Please, Alpha, don't let me die like this. My guts in the air, my stomach devoured by gnawing pain. I don't know if the blue-eyed enemy is tall, if he's short, if he's good-looking, if he's ugly. I don't know if he's young like us or if he's our father's age. He was lucky. He saved himself. He's no longer important. If you are my brother, my childhood friend, if you are the one I have always known, the one I love like I love my mother and my father, then I beg you a second time to slit my throat. Do you enjoy hearing me moan like a little boy, watching as my dignity is chased away by shame? We are still in the war zone. We are in space one. Space one is the war with the two trenches, the no man's land in between. And it's very interesting how this trench is described in the book. Initially, it is spoken, there is the trope of the inside out. So we begin with Mademba's body being slit, his insides coming out. So whatever is inside has come out, has spilled out, his guts. And then when we talk of the trenches, he says again, the inside is out. The trenches have been dug by putting what was inside outside and making a hole. At another point, he refers to the trench as the woman's vagina, the vagina of the earth, through which are going to be born these mad soldiers who would scream across no man's land. This is the space that we have. In this space, there is going to be, it's a space of separation, like any war zone. So they will be, he will lose Mademba. He makes a white friend in the trench. This is another very interesting aspect of the book. It doesn't paint all members of the Caucasian race with the same brush. In the trench, so they're all soldiers, right? There are whites, there are blacks, there are different kinds of blacks, there are different kinds of whites. And inside this trench, he makes friends with a Jean-Baptiste. He doesn't know anything about Jean-Baptiste, but Jean-Baptiste is nice to him, as he describes it at various points in time, that Jean-Baptiste is nice to him, Jean-Baptiste understands his pain, Jean-Baptiste is a jolly good fellow, he has a lot of fun. We have a passage or two later on about Jean-Baptiste, but he gives you a very interesting detail. He says Jean-Baptiste, the day he's going to die, Jean-Baptiste is sad. And he says, I don't know, he seems to have received a lettre parfumée, he says. So we understand it's a love letter. And he doesn't know what's written in it because remember, Mademba speaks French. Alpha doesn't. So every time there's going to be an interpreter, one of the blacks who can speak French, what we would call pidgin English. So let's say this kind of special French that would be spoken by somebody, which is actually evolved and developed during the wars so that these blacks who were used as cannon fodder could catch an order that you were giving them. So they were taught that it was okay not to conjugate a verb. It's enough if you spoke in the infinitive, but as long as you got your meaning across. And then later on, they laughed at them for their French. That's another matter. So Jean-Baptiste is very nice to him. And when he comes back, not that Jean-Baptiste can understand too much, but can express too much to him directly, but they do manage. There is a certain camaraderie that is born. But he says that the day he received that love letter and he cried, that day Jean-Baptiste had decided to die. We go to the next slide. And here he speaks, in this passage, he's going to speak about madness. And he understands that unless you're mad, you won't go to war. Right? You need that madness on the battlefield. That madness will chase away fear. But the problem is, how long can you remain mad? Because there's a regulation to that. You must be mad when they ask you to be mad, and you must be sane when they ask you to be sane, because it doesn't suit them anymore when you're mad continuously. Don't tell me we don't need madness in the battlefield. God's truth. The mad fear nothing. The others, white or black, play at being mad, perform madness, so that they can calmly throw themselves in front of the bullets of the enemy on the other side. It allows them to run straight at death without being too afraid. You'll have to be mad to obey Captain Armand when he whistles for the attack, knowing there's almost no chance you'll come home alive. God's truth. You'd have to be crazy to drag yourself screaming out of the belly of the earth. The bullets from the enemy on the other side, the giant seeds falling from the metallic sky, they aren't afraid of screams. They aren't afraid to pass through heads, flesh, to break bones, to sever lives. Temporary madness makes it possible to forget the truth about bullets. Temporary madness in war is bravery's sister. This is where I think we come back to the original trope that I mentioned to you, the epic trope. Any epic sings the glories of war, but this war isn't glorious. So while this has epic incantatory prose, it has the central figure of the hero and his military companion, the hero and his best friend, parce que c'était lui, parce que c'était moi. While this element is there, war itself is viewed as a kind of temporary insanity and for a cause which can never really justify this kind of massacre. Now we will see how he begins to see through the agenda. Next slide, please. Initially, when he brought back the severed hand, it was okay. It was fun. So everybody looked at it and nobody had thought that this can be done. And so everybody admires him. They say, oh, you deserve a war medal. What an amazing thing. But once the 8th hand has come, actually the 7th hand, but one hand disappears. So there'll be 8 hands that he's cut. A rumor begins to float around to say that he's a sorcerer. And he is what the Africans call a dhim. A dhim is a devourer of people's insights. They think I've always been one, and that the war has revealed it. The rumor, stark naked now, claimed I had eaten the insides of Mademba Diop, my more than brother, before he was even dead. The brazen rumor said I should be feared. The rumor, spread-legged and ass in the air, said that I had devoured the insides of the enemies from the other side, but also the insides of friends. The obscene rumor said, beware, watch out. What does he do with the severed hands? He shows them to us, and then they disappear. Beware, watch out. Okay? So now you have this very gesture, which was brave, right? Which for which he deserved the medal. The fact that he brought a severed arm that held a rifle, the same gesture in the same war suddenly becomes uncomfortable because this savagery begins to become something that they fear. And so they start calling him the soldier who's also a sorcerer. And remember, this is part of the general the colonial stereotype, right? All of them, the Africans, when they are not savage, when they are not stupid, they're sorcerers. Next one, please. And then look at the way he's describing this rumor. I find that very interesting. God's truth. I, Alpha Nindi, the youngest child of the old man, saw the rumor chase after me, half naked, shameless, like a fallen woman. And yet the Tubab, remember, if the whites called the blacks Shokoda, uh, the blacks were not far behind. They called them Tubab. So yet the Tubabs and the Shokolas who watched the rumor chase me, who lifted my her skirt as she passed, who pinched her ass, snickering, and continued to smile at me, to talk to me as if nothing was wrong. Friendly on the outside, terrorized on the inside, even the toughest, even the hardest, even the bravest. So now he sees himself, his own camp sees him as an enemy. Next slide, please. This is another very interesting explanation about war, how he sees it. And like I told you, it's an anti-war agenda, but it's never openly stated as so. Humans are always finding absurd explanations for things. I know this. I understand it. Now that I'm able to think what I want, my brothers in combat, white or black, need to believe that it isn't the war that will kill them, but the evil eye. They need to believe that it won't be one of the thousands of bullets fired by the enemy from the other side that will randomly kill them. They don't like randomness. Randomness is too absurd. They want someone to blame. They'd rather think that the enemy bullet that hits them was directed, guided by someone cruel, malevolent, with evil intent. They believe that this cruel, malevolent, evil intention one is me. God's truth. Their thinking is weak, flimsy. They think if I'm alive after all these attacks, if no bullet has hit me, it's because I'm a soldier sorcerer. They think the worst. They say that many of their trenchants may have been hit by bullets that were meant for me. So you see, the war hero suddenly becomes the soldier who's the sorcerer. Next one, please. And here he's going to speak about how he loved Mademba, because I loved Mademba, my more than brother, God's truth. I loved him so. I was so afraid he would die. I wanted so badly for the two of us to return safe and sound to Gandiol. I would have done anything to keep him alive. And here you have the typical epic trope of the hero and his brother or his military ally shadowing each other very closely. I followed him everywhere on the battlefield. As soon as Captain Armand would whistle for the attack, so as to fully warn the enemy from the other side that we were about to come out shrieking from the belly of the earth, so as to warn the enemy to prepare to spray us with bullets, I would glue myself to Mademba. So the bullet that hurt him would hurt me, or the bullet that killed him would kill me, or the bullet that missed him would miss me. God's truth. On attack days, we were elbow to elbow on the battlefield, shoulder to shoulder. We ran shrieking towards the enemy on the other side in the same rhythm. We fired our guns at the same time. We were like twin brothers who came out the same day or the same night from the mother's womb. And remember, if they are born of two mothers in Gandiol, in the space of Gandiol, in the war space, they come out of the earth's belly, the trenches together. So war seems to have reinforced this friendship, given them a common cause, and made them actually brothers because they are born of the trenches, both of them at the same time. So now we move on to the second space, which is Gandiol. Continue. Next one, please. And another observation about the war that I wanted to share with you. Yes, I understood. God's truth, that on the battlefield, they wanted only fleeting madness, madmen of rage, madmen of pain, furious madmen, but temporary one, no continuous madmen. As soon as the fighting ends, we'll have to file away our rage, our pain, and our fury. Pain is tolerated. We can bring our pain home on the condition that we keep it to ourselves. But rage and fury cannot be brought back to the trench. Before returning home, we must denude ourselves of rage and fury. We must strip ourselves of it. And if we don't, we are no longer playing the game of war. Madness after the captain blows the whistle to retreat is taboo. So here you have someone who, as an outsider, who hasn't fought such a war, who's never belonged to an army in the Western world, is now deconstructing this army, deconstructing this war, asking very uncomfortable questions and making very pertinent observations, but on a simple, straight, candid tone. Next one, please. And he's going to speak about the hands. I'll spare you this because it's a little dark. He's going to speak of each of the hands, and he looks at them like they're really war trophies. He's forgotten who they belong to. Yes, there's a smaller one. He thinks it probably belongs to a child, and some of them have hair, some of them don't. Then he puts them away. He's put salt on them, lets them dry. For him, they're like dried fish. Next one. And this is his white friend who he meets, my only real white friend. You see, he could have chosen, Diop could have chosen to tar all Caucasians with the same brush. He doesn't do that. He says the only Tubab who came to console me after Mademba's death. And it's a very beautiful description. They share things, and remember, they can't speak to each other. They have to understand from gestures or seek the help of an interpreter. Next one, please. Jean-Baptiste made me laugh. That's interesting. And then you have a little, and war again. There is a light moment in this war when Jean-Baptiste is going to take away the first arm that has been brought back, and he's going to keep it and make people shake hands with it and say, hey, you're all going to be court-martialed because you shook hands with the enemy. And people scream when they realize that it's a dead man's hand, the one that Alpha brought back. This is the only light moment in the book. Next one, please. I just want to dwell on a few images. He's going to talk about the black mamba. Okay, he says, I crawl like the black mamba. Now, I checked with African specialists and specialists of African literature and mythology, where the mamba has a special place. Apparently, it varies from tribe to tribe, and they couldn't really give an explanation. But finally, the National Geographic did. Mambas are an indigenous snake variety, serpent variety, and the black mamba is the most venomous. And what is the worst part about it is that it moves very fast. It does 14 miles an hour, and it doesn't attack straight away. It opens its mouth, and that is enough to terrorize a hippopotamus. So even when it's going somewhere and it sees elephants or hippopotamus or whatever it is on its way, all it does is open its mouth. It's not like the hooded cobra. It opens its mouth. It's a black mouth inside. And you actually see hippopotamus and large animals scurry away in fear. So when he says, I'm like the black mamba, and that is crawling near the enemy's trench, he's speaking of the fact that he moves quickly, he's very fast, he never misses his prey, and he terrorizes his prey before killing them, which is the purpose of the war, which is the reason why he was hired for this war in any case. The number 7 is very significant because you'll tell me it's significant for all cultures. He seems to use it. I mean, one of these explanations is that it is the 3 is a divine number, and 4 for everything that is terrestrial. We find the same thing back here. Then you see the unk. It is supposed to be a pink lizard, just completely translucent, and you can see its heart and everything that through and through. But it's again a very dangerous animal because its urine is poisonous. So it's very, very, very dangerous as a lizard is. And this is when he describes the hands, the dried hands, he says they look like the unk, which is a kind of lizard. Next one, please. Then there is this scene, I won't get into too many details right now, but if you want to read it, it's the scene of the mutiny. We all know of the various mutinies that happened in the World War I and World War II. But in this particular one, he brings out the savagery because Captain Armand, who the soldiers refuse to obey because they've had it up to here and they don't want to obey him anymore. They don't want to be cannon fodder. And he says that they have to be handcuffed and pushed out of the trench so that the enemy bullets kill them. If they do that, that is, if they die handcuffed, blindfolded, shattered by the enemy, slaughtered by the enemy, their families will not be told that they refuse to fight. The family will get the pension. And if they refuse to do that, they will be shot dead inside the trench by their own brothers in arms with whom they had fought till yesterday. So this particular thing is brought out in all its savagery. And he says, so one, that's why he says that, I don't understand this war. First, you're fighting somebody from the other side, and then you're fighting against somebody from inside. You're doing the most dishonorable things. And we are supposed to be the savages, and you are bringing us civilization. Pray explain. Next one, please. He says, we never would have believed that we're treating our fellow soldiers like enemies from the other side. And then the other lot are slaughtered. I have never seen anything so ugly, he says. Next one. This is again the scene of the mutiny. Next one, please. And here this is the terrible scene where they climb out of the trenches and they shout. Alphonse climbed out of our trench, stumbling like an invalid and crying, now I know why I must die. I know why. I'm dying for your pension, O death. I love you, O death. I love you, O. And then a spit, small, malicious shell decapitated him. His brains rained on us. Next one. And then this is where he says, the captain finally tells him, you know what, boss, you need to get out of here because you're quite frightening. He says, your way of waging war is a little too savage. I never ordered you to cut off the enemy's hands. It isn't regulation. You will content yourself with killing them, not mutilating them. The civilities of war forbid it. Understood? You must leave tomorrow. So what civility? What regulation? Anyway, what was that mushet for if it was not supposed to be used? Was it some sort of a hand fan to be used by the soldier? So now we move out of the wash space into the space where he's sent to, that is, he's called the rear, à l'arrière, where he's supposed to go and recuperate. The next one, please. And there is a Dr. Francois who is supposed to help him heal. And there is this entire, fantasy sequence where he imagines that Dr. Francois' daughter, who's also a nurse, is lusting after him. And there is also this scene where he imagines that he rapes her and she enjoys it and so on. And then we come to the another part, which is space 3, which is actually the space of his childhood, which is the space of Gandiol. I just checked, maybe Mr. K is telling me I've gone overshot my time. 1 minute.
No, please finish, Vidya, no problem, okay?
Okay, great. So he says that the third space is Gandiol. And Gandiol is his childhood, where his mother and his father are together, and he has this childhood with Mademba. So Gandiol is the space, that beautiful space of the African village with the river flowing by, and so on and so forth. And each of these spaces, the war space, the space of Dr. Francois, which is the rear, as it is called, which is away from the battlefield, just a little behind, and where you go to recuperate, and Gandiol. When we look at the 3 spaces, we find that space 1 is a space of separation, naturally, because it's the war. People die here. But in the space of separation, he loses 2 people who are important to him. One man who was very important to his life, who was Mademba, and there is the second person who has become an ally now, a military ally, and that is Jean-Baptiste, who also dies. But is there union? Yes, because he describes a moment. He's constantly describing the war space and the trenches as the woman's vagina from which they emerge, the insides that are outside, and how they seek refuge in it again. So there is union with the earth, while there is separation from the two people. Then you come to the space of the of Dr. Francois' clinic where he's being treated. Here he has come with the seven hands because when he's sent away, he decides to carry the seven hands, which is salted and dried like dried fish. And when at one point he decides to bury them. And so when he buries them, somebody sees him, and that's what gets him into trouble. But he's separated from the from those hands, but he unites with, at least in fantasy, with the doctor's daughter, who's also a nurse. And then you have Gandiol, where he's separated from his mother, but he gets Mademba. And he gets Parikiyam, his love interest. So each of these three spaces are defined in terms of union and separation. But what really remains till the end in his life, the only reality, because we are not very sure whether he lives, whether he dies. Mademba is dead. But then we go into the last chapter is actually a story. And the story he tells, again, I told you, Africans have a wonderful tradition, wonderfully rich tradition of epics and stories. Now, Mademba Diop, every African family has its own totem. So the totem of Alpha Nindiai, the hero of our story, is the lion. And so in the end, he is going to end with a fable. And what is the fable? The fable is the story of the fickle princess who's never happy with any of the men she meets, and she's constantly looking for the perfect man. And who does she want? She wants to marry a man without scars, a man who's very beautiful, who has no scars. Her nurse tells her that a man without scars is a man without history. A man without scars is a man without achievements. A man without scars is a man who has nothing to prove his valor. But no, she insists, the fickle princess, that she will marry a perfect man. And who comes her way? Comes her way a man who is a sorcerer, a lion sorcerer. He's perfect, he's extremely good looking. And she marries him against her nurse's advice. And when he goes back, takes her from her home into the forest, one by one, everything falls away. So the people who accompanied him, somebody becomes a hyena, somebody becomes a hare, somebody becomes a crocodile. And she finds herself in this strange land. And she says, my nurse was right, I had to run. The nurse was a wise woman. She had given her 3 talismans: an egg, a bit of wood, and a pebble. So she starts running from this sorcerer husband who's perfect. First, she throws an egg, it becomes a river. He drinks up the river, he's running after her. Then she throws a bit of wood, it becomes a forest, but he cuts down the trees and keeps following her. And then she finally throws a pebble and it becomes a mountain. He climbs over the mountain, he's almost got her. When an archer aims an arrow and kills the lion sorcerer. And who is this man? He's a man with a scar. He's a man with history. He's a brave man. He's the nurse's son. So now if we look at the entire story, this fickle princess could well be Faritiam, the love interest who has to choose between Mademba Diop and Alpha Nindiai, and he chooses Alpha Nindiai. So she is the princess. She chooses the wrong man, the handsome Alpha, the wrestler, the bodybuilder, who has perfectly aligned teeth, who has a broad chest and shoulders. She chooses him. She chooses wrong. And so finally, who liberates her, who loves her, who's the right man for her? This is Mademba Diop, the weak man, the ugly man, the man with the scar. And so this is a very interesting passage, and I'll leave you with this, unless we have the time to see a few more slides, is when he says, and I would love to read this for you, this story, like all interesting stories, is full of clever innuendo. Whoever tells a well-known story, like the one about the lion sorcerer and the fickle princess, must always be hiding another story behind it. So he doesn't tell you exactly to, put this on that, or this is equal to that, like a chemistry equation. He leaves you with a clever innuendo. Next slide, please. Let's move to, and it ends with this: God's truth, I swear to you that now, whenever I think of us, he is me and I am him. Okay. And I would like you to go back to what we read in the first slide, where he says that, where he quotes Montaigne, and Montaigne says, Parce que c'était lui, parce que c'était moi, because he was he and I was I. Diop goes one step further. He is me and I am him. So this was the novel for you. I wanted to, do we have time to hear this man read an extract, or shall we go to Sarojini Naidu and close, Mrs. K?
No, Vidya, let us hear it.
Okay.
I mean, those who can stay on will stay on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you please play this, Anusha?
You can't hear it, Vidya.
Whoops. I think you need to optimize the sound, Anusha.
I'll try again, ma'am.
Yeah, maybe go to this thing directly. Now?
At first, they laughed with me heartily. They enjoyed watching
Perfect.
me home with a rifle and an enemy hand. They were so pleased with me. They even thought of giving me another medal. But after the fourth enemy hand, they no longer laughed so easily. The white soldiers were beginning to say, I could see in their eyes, this chocolat is really strange. The others, chocolat soldiers from West Africa like me, began to say, and I also read it in their eyes, this Alpha Ndiaye from the village of Gandion in Saint Louis in Senegal is strange. When did he become so strange? The tubabs and the chocolats, as the captain called them, continued to slap me on the shoulder, but their laughter and their smiles had changed. They began to be very, very, very afraid of me. They began to whisper right after the fourth enemy hand. For the first three hands, I was a legend. They cheered me when I returned. They fed me delicacies, offered me tobacco, helped me rinse off with big buckets of water, helped me clean my uniform. I saw in their eyes that they understood. I was performing in their place the grotesque savage, the enlisted savage obeying orders. The enemy on the other side should be trembling in his boots and under his helmet. In the beginning, my war brothers weren't bothered by my stench of death, the stench of a butcher of human flesh. But beginning with the fourth hand, they avoided smelling me. They continued to give me delicacies, to offer me bits of tobacco they'd collected from here or there, to loan me a blanket to warm myself, but with a fake smile plastered on their terrified soldiers' faces. They no longer helped me rinse myself with big buckets. They let me clean my uniform myself. Suddenly, nobody was slapping me on the shoulder and laughing. God's truth, I became untouchable. So they set aside a bowl, a cup, a fork, and a spoon for me that they kept in a corner of our dugout. When I came home very late at night on battle days, long after the others, never mind the wind, rain, or snow, as the captain said, the cook would tell me to go get my things. When he served me soup, he was very, very careful that his ladle not touch the interior, the sides, or the rim of my bowl. The rumor spread. It spread. And as it spread, it shed its clothes and eventually its shame. Well dressed at the beginning, well appointed at the beginning, well outfitted, well medaled, the brazen rumor turned into a shameless woman with her legs spread, her ass in the air. I didn't notice it right away. I didn't recognize the change. I didn't know what she was plotting. Everyone had seen her, but no one described it to me. I finally caught wind of the whispers and learned that my strangeness had been transformed to madness, and madness to witchcraft. Soldier, sorcerer.
And we'll now end with, if you have time, there is a visual with, there's a slam to tell you how slam poetry, which is very contemporary, is going to use the theme of the black soldier and the tirailleurs sénégalais. We know there's a poem by Tagore about it, but the slam poetry is something else. It's today's slam. So, Sophia, this is in your honor.
Aux tirailleurs sénégalais, morts pour la France. Voici le soleil qui fait tendre la poitrine des vierges, qui fait sourire sur les bancs verts les vieillards. Voici le soleil qui réveillerait les morts sous une terre maternelle. J'entends, boum, j'entends le bruit des canons esturants. On fleurit les tombes, on réchauffe le soldat inconnu. Vous, mes frères obscurs, personne ne vous nomme. On promet 500 000 de vos enfants à la gloire des futurs morts. On les remercie d'avance, futurs morts obscurs. Écoutez-moi, tirailleurs sénégalais, dans la solitude de la terre noire et de la mort, dans votre solitude, sans yeux, sans oreilles, plus que dans ma peau, sombre fond de la province, sans même la chaleur de vos camarades couchés, tout contre vous, comme jadis dans la tranchée, jadis dans les palabres du village. Écoutez-moi, tirailleurs à la peau noire, bien que sans oreilles et sans yeux dans votre triple enceinte de nuit. Nous n'avons pas loué de pleureuses, pas même les larmes de vos femmes anciennes. Elles ne se rappellent que vos grands coups de colère, préférant l'ardeur des vivants. Les plaintes des pleureuses trop claires, trop vite asséchées. Les joues de vos femmes, comme en saison sèche, les torrents de fouta. Les larmes les plus chaudes, trop claires et trop vite bues au coin des lèvres oublieuses. Nous vous apportons, écoutez-nous, nous qui épelions vos noms dans les mois que vous mouriez. Dans ces jours de peur sans mémoire, vous apportons l'amitié de vos camarades d'âge. Puissais-je un jour d'une voix couleur de fraise, puissais-je chanter l'amitié des camarades ferventes comme des entrailles et délicates, fortes comme des tendons. Écoutez-nous, morts étendus dans l'eau, au profond des plaines du nord et de l'est. Recevez ce sol rouge, sous le soleil d'été, ce sol rougi du sang des blanches hosties. Recevez le salut de vos camarades noirs, tirailleurs sénégalais. Mort pour la République.
This is to tell you how war continues to be a very contemporary subject. Nothing's changed. In fact, the First World War was called La Guerre des Guerres, the last of the last wars. And it actually turned out to be not at all the last one, and several of them followed. And we have a poem by Sarojini Naidu called The Gift of India. With your permission, I'd like to read it because I think many of our Indian soldiers went and they too remain unsung. You must know that after the war happened, and I'm talking to you from archives, there were people allotted, troops allotted to go and find these bodies that were lying scattered everywhere and give them tombs to be buried. And you should know that 105 people or 108 people were given the job of covering 650 kilometers. Whereas for the fields where we knew that white soldiers had died, there were many more. Every body and piece of limb was collected, and they were given a semi-decent burial. And so this poem by Sarojini Naidu is deeply moving. I read it out to you. Gift of India. Is there aught you need that my hands withhold? Rich gifts of raiment, of grain or gold. Lo, I have flung to the east and the west priceless treasures torn from my breast, and yielded the sons of my stricken womb to the drumbeats of beauty, the sabres of doom. Next one. Gathered like pearls in their alien graves, silent they sleep by the Persian waves. Scattered like shells on Egyptian sands, they lie with pale brows and brave, broken hands. They're strewn like blossoms mown down by chance on the blood-brown meadows of Flanders and France. Can ye measure the grief of the tears I weep, or compass the woe of the watch I keep, or the pride that thrills through my heart's despair, and the hope that comforts the anguish of prayer, and the far, sad, glorious vision I see of the torn red banners of victory? Because is there a victor in war is the question you ask yourself. Who is the victor? He who survives or he who dies? When the terror and the tumult of hate shall cease, and life be refashioned on anvils of peace, and your love shall offer memorial thanks to the comrades who fought in your dauntless ranks, and you honor the deeds of the deathless ones. Remember the blood of my martyred sons. I think this is an exquisite poem. And today France has war memorial for Indian soldiers, and there have been exhibitions held, but honestly, I don't think they are remembered. There is a Vedika Kant who has written a beautiful book, Who Will Remember Me, which has been extensively researched. There are letters, there are photographs, and but there is Mulkraj Anand's Across the Black Waters. But otherwise, they remain largely the forgotten sons of India who lie still in foreign lands. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being here with you. I overshot my time, but I sort of got carried away. This is a book that's extremely dear to me, and I wanted you to, to get a taste of the prose, to feel the thing, to see these stark images. I hope you sleep well tonight.
Oh, Vidya, that was extremely moving. But I think there are a few questions and comments.
With pleasure, I
think we have just 10 minutes for that, and then we will have to finish. But sadly, we will have to put an end to this. I think Nandita has already raised her hand. I think everyone should unmute themselves. Please do. And, you can make your comments, ask your questions. Please unmute yourself. Usha, can you please unmute everybody? Yeah, Nandita, go ahead, Nandita.
Minal, I can't unmute. They have to unmute themselves.
Okay, everyone, please unmute yourself. I see Frédéric.
Yes, he's a real pal, isn't
Salut.
he? Merci, Frédéric, d'être là.
Okay, so Nandita, go ahead.
Thank you, Vidya. It is beautiful, as usual, a lovely reading, and of course, this book is heart-rending. I mean, it obviously brings up so much for all of us. So much of not really directly nostalgia, but of so much nostalgia of reading about war. And what I would really love to hear about, maybe if we don't have time tomorrow, I'll continue this elsewhere with you. But this entire psychoanalytical aspect that comes out when he speaks about him, I don't remember the word, bringing out the entrails of the white soldiers. And every time it's almost like a ritual where everything done to his friend, he repeats. And here it's extremely ironical because where he thinks that by not helping his friend die, he was cruel and not human. And here, by doing the utmost cruel act onto someone else, he feels he's being humane because at the end he slits their throat and allows them to die, thus doing for them what he couldn't do for his own friend. And that thing comes up in so many ways, like the no man's land idea, where he talks about it's a no man's land which is much more than just a war no man's land, right? It's the whole identity no man's land of the colonized and the black man. And so the entire psychoanalytical aspect, I'm sure you've thought and written about, and I'd love to hear about it now.
I don't know. I'm not sure whether I'm really competent to answer that question, but the little I gathered, I spoke to people, I've been in discussion and so on. There is the whole concept of the sacrifice. Okay, so the sheep that is sacrificed. And so the sacrifice operates at several levels. One is the white man who sacrifices the black man for his own sacrifice. He doesn't sacrifice as the white man. Of course, there were also white soldiers who fought the war, young people, but there was always a power equation difference. So there is the concept of the sacrifice. But he has to go, if you remember the first time there's a very terrible scene where he does it to a young soldier. Okay, he says it's a small hand, it's a small soldier, probably less than 20 years old, younger than him. And for him, there is revenge on the one side. Okay, he has to take revenge for what happened to his brother. That's a war trope too. It's a matter of avenging the honor of avenging the death of his friend. So he has to avenge that death, and so he will do this. But he will do unto them as was done unto his friend. But it will be done like a sacrifice, the ritual slaughtering of the sheep. Psychoanalytical explanation, somebody more competent must give it. This is all I know.
Minal, may I
Yes,
just
Wispy, please. Yeah, please do, Wispy.
Yes, to thank
Our president of the Asiatic Society, Wispy Balaporia.
Vidya, je vous félicite.
Je vous remercie.
Présentation. Really, I'm afraid I wasn't able to read the book, but it is quite brutal, I think, what the picture given, but that was the fact, I think, which was brought out. And of course, as you said, there are layers and layers and sacrificial aspect. And of course, it was the black man being sacrificed by the whites. I think that was fairly evident, but otherwise. Anyway, thank you so much. And I'm so glad I could attend your session.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meenal, for arranging.
May I speak, Meenal? Mangala
Yeah,
here.
please do. And then
Yes.
I'm going to insist that Frederic says something. I hope he's listening. Okay, Mangala, go ahead.
Okay, with that, it was an overwhelming experience. You really conveyed the entire novel to us. We felt we had lived through that experience. And your analysis was excellent. Talking about psychoanalysis, I wouldn't go into that, but people have shown how when cruelty is inflicted on you, you can be cruel to others. I'm going back to a 19th century author, Guy de Maupassant, when in Ma Mère Sauvage, when this woman is looking after 5 German soldiers as though they were her sons, when she hears her son has been killed in war, she burns them to death. Anyway, it was wonderful. I would like to ask one question, main one. How have the French taken this book? What was their reaction to this book getting the Booker Prize? Because it shows that they have literally wiped out certain areas during the war, and the role of the tirailleurs has actually been distorted.
Maybe Frederic is best placed
Yes.
to speak about this, but I think the book was very well received. And Frédéric, est-ce que tu veux dire un mot, s'il te plaît? T'es là? Voilà, on
Il faut
t'écoute.
bien parler.
On t'écoute.
Yeah. So,
Mais en anglais, s'il vous plaît.
En anglais, sure. Thank you, Vidya, for the analysis and everything about French literary. But about the question of how can we welcome this prize book? So first, it's very rare French get the prize book. It's a unique case. I think it's because French authors, French people never. I don't know how many times we get this prize. It's
the first time, Frederic. This is
the first time. Yeah,
Very
it's the first time.
Yes.
Very first.
And it's very bizarre the relations with an English prize, because we consider French affairs are not really considered by English people because we are so different. And I think if English are so take care of French literary, it's by African affairs, France-Afrique, because I think for French, this bloody English consider this. It's not the right way to get a prize to give a prize to a French, because it's too. That's why it's not the good face. It's not the beauty face of French history, and I think it's once again English. They can't understand French people but I think we are proud. We are so proud because we have to consider English language, French language is not a property of Hexagon. I think French language, it's a gift for everybody wants to speak French. And so if someone wants to speak French, it's a gift for French people, it's a gift for literary. And I think we have to respect everything is speaking with French, is writing with French. And we have to let people. Yeah, sorry.
No, sorry, that was an interruption.
Sorry.
And
it's not a property of Hexagon. French is universal, and I think if someone from Senegal, from Creole area wants to speak French, want to write in French, I think it's a gift for everybody. And that, unfortunately, French is a property of Paris, of Hexagon, of Métropole, as we say usually, and we have to let this language live and tell the reality. And I think we have to respect how the French can live out of France. And I think it's a gift for us, but we can recognize that. We can't recognize it's the French. It's for us. It's just this bloody people never consider we are great authors, French from Hexagon. And I think
Frederic, you're being recorded here.
Yeah, sorry. We have to cut it.
Go on.
Sorry.
Okay. Anything more? Any more blasphemy?
and they blaspheme for no, but I think Vidya is for Vidya Creole language is very important, and I think it's more than we can consider. Creolity or Creole, as Edouard Glissant can say, is the future of the French for the French speakers, because we have to let this language live again, live free with another lexical, another accent, another subject. And I think we have to consider this language, the French language, is free, open for everyone. It's your house, it's your home for everybody. And if someone in France can say it's our language, the language is not really a property of someone. And Creole, I think it's the future, because there's no opposition, no war for a language. We can have a war about a territory, about for more wealth or something like this. But for a language, the language is the son or the daughter of the encounter. When two people, even if a slave or a master and a slave, they create a new language. Creole is a new language, and the victory of the slave is the master have to speak Creole too.
Yes.
Yeah, and no master can accept that they are speaking Creole. The Béquets are speaking Creole, and is the victory or not for the slave, not for the master, is a victory of the meeting of these people. They create something together, beyond the violence, beyond the slavery. They create culture, they create new dishes, they create new garment. It's a reality, and we can build on this base, as Edouard Glissant said, we can build something together with this language. And in India, Creolity is the same. It's the ground, it's the soil for the seeds. We can, the new trees can grow in this on this Creole, and Creolity is a gift for the future.
Thank you so much, Frédéric. It's really a fascinating discussion, but unfortunately, we will have to end it here. I don't know how long our Zoom platform will continue for. So I would just like to propose a formal vote of thanks, Vidya, but it is said in all sincerity, because it was really very intense. It was riveting. It was moving. It was emotional. And you have really given us an in-depth analysis of the story and its writing. And you have helped us to reach the very soul of this narrative and to convey the destabilizing effects of the ghost language. So we thank you. Thank you for illuminating us with your perspectives. And you have given us much food for thought and much to ponder over. Thank you, Vidya. And to all the participants.
Yes, my grateful thank you.
Thank you. We are ever so happy. Yeah, we are ever so happy that you have been with us with your comments, your questions, your inputs. It's been an extremely enriching and rewarding session. And as always, a grateful thanks to Dr. Usha Vijayalakshmi for being at the helm of our boat. Her technical support is invaluable, indispensable. She has continuously sustained us in all our efforts. And so, Usha, I think we will end there, and thank you so much.
Thank you to Anusha,
my
student and colleague from Bombay University. But for whom today I would have been in a big soup because I'm operating out of several gadgets. She's been a pillar of strength. Thank you, Anusha, for being there. Frédéric, thank you for joining in spite of your very heavy day. It was a personal request. You took it in, and each and every one of you, you took your time. You spent the evening with me. Very grateful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anusha. Yes, thank you. Frédéric, you were the only Frenchman here. The others are in Delhi for a reunion, you know. Otherwise, they would have been with us, you know.
Long live Frédéric. Vive l'amitié franco-indienne.
Vive Frédéric Simon.
Vive Frédéric Simon. Merci, Fred. Merci,
Merci.
beaucoup. Merci à
Merci
vous.
beaucoup. Merci, Anusha. Merci, Anusha.
Merci, merci.
Merci, Thaïs.
Merci à vous.
Merci.
Merci
Au revoir.
Au revoir. Au revoir tout le monde.
Bye, bye.
Bye, Sureka. Bye, bye, Vispi. See you tomorrow.
Bye. Au revoir. Merci.
Au revoir.
Bye,
Merci
dear.
beaucoup.
Very nice,
Merci.
Vidya.
Au
Well
revoir,
done. Bye.
Jyotsna.
Au revoir, madame.